And let's get straight to the source with 2024 presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. Vivek, thanks for being here. You said in May that you believed it would be embarrassing, a disaster, and fundamentally uncourageous for Donald Trump to refuse to debate. Do you still feel that way tonight?
Well, look, if he refuses to debate through the entire debate season, I have an issue with that. But I have no issue with him skipping the first couple of debates. The truth is, many people in this country didn't even know who I was 6 months ago. So this is a good opportunity for me to introduce myself to the country. He's been on that debate stage countless times. He's also been U.S. president for 4 years. So if he wants to skip the first couple of them, I have no issue with that. But I do think he should be on the debate stage at some point throughout the course of this year. So that's where I'm at.
You rarely, if ever, really criticize Trump directly. I think part of that, and tell me if I'm wrong, is part of his strategy when it comes to winning over his voters. But how do you beat the Republican frontrunner in this race without directly engaging him?
Well, the truth is, the reason I don't want to criticize Trump is because everybody else from, networks like the one we're on right now on down are doing plenty good job of making up attacks that shouldn't even exist. Prosecutors across this country charging cases that should have never been brought. I think Donald Trump's defeat of Hillary Clinton was probably the single most important political event of my lifetime. So I don't care to pile on with those criticisms. I think he was a good president, but I want to build on his agenda to take the America First movement to the next level. The fact is, I'm 38 years old. I have fresh legs. I am able to reach young people across this country. And I believe I am the only candidate in this race who can actually deliver a landslide election, a Reagan 1980-style moral mandate, by building a coalition, a multi-ethnic working class coalition of Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, white Americans, Asian Americans, men, women, young, old. That's what it's going to take to win this election. No state left behind, no city left behind, no American left behind. And you've seen that in the way I'm campaigning, from the south side of Chicago to the inner city of Philadelphia in Kensington. That's different than any other candidate in this race. And Caitlin, that's why I'm confident that I'm going to win it in a landslide. Do it by uniting the Republican Party and uniting this country, not by criticizing other candidates, Donald Trump on down, but by articulating a vision for where we are going. And it's working. Look at where I am in the polls. Relative to 6 months ago, it seems to be that we're well on our way to get there.
One thing I'll say is we're not making up any attacks on Donald Trump. I mean, covering his indictments is one thing. How you feel about those is pretty clear. One thing that you will likely be asked about on Wednesday night is foreign policy. And you recently said that to protect Taiwan, you would do this.
Guess what? We'll put a gun in every Taiwanese household, train them how to use it. That is how you make Xi Jinping think twice.
Do you really think that would be a sufficient plan to deter a Chinese invasion if it includes long-range missiles, ground troops, an aerial blockade, a naval blockade?
Caitlin,
all of the different measures here?
Caitlin, of course it's not sufficient. You take that tiny little clip when I've articulated at the Nixon Library last week, a 1-hour speech with a whole range of deterrents. That is part of it. But I've also said that I would pull Russia out of its military alliance with China. I've also said that we would bolster our partnership with India to be able to close the Andaman Sea and the Malacca Strait. I've also said that we would actually send a signal very clearly that we will defend Taiwan, moving from strategic ambiguity to strategic clarity to say that we will defend Taiwan until we have semiconductor independence in this country. And so, yes, part of this is turning Taiwan into a porcupine. I think exporting our Second Amendment is a relatively free or low-cost way to do that. But I find it laughable that you will take that clip and then put words into my mouth as though that was a sufficient deterrent. Caitlin, with due respect, that's a joke, especially when I've offered as expansive of a deterrent strategy as I have.
It's not putting words into your mouth, and it's not saying that you didn't say those other things. It's just saying that you did say that part of your effort when it comes to Taiwan is giving people in Taiwan handguns.
This is really funny, Caitlin. It's been very educational for me to learn how media works. Yes, that is important. No one ever said that was sufficient to deter an invasion. From India to Russia to what I've said we would do with moving Ohio-class SSGNs to the South China Sea and to the Indo-Pacific. This is the stuff of actual deterrence and also strategic clarity that we would actually defend Taiwan. Yes, I do think I am the president who best knows how to deter China from going after Taiwan before we've achieved semiconductor independence, which is the most important foreign policy accomplishment the next U.S. president can deliver. And I gave a specific speech at the Nixon Library. In a big part, actually moving
Russia
Russia
said
out
that
of
you would
China's
open up
alliance
an NRA bureau
is the reverse
in
of what
Taiwan.
Nixon would have done.
I mean, you also talked about.
Yes,
I just think
yes,
when
it's
you
part of
listen
this
to
porcupine
plans
strategy.
to deter China, it typically focuses on radar systems and missiles that they need, not necessarily AR-15s.
Caitlin, you might be able to do this trick better with other candidates who don't really know how to respond to the game.
It's not a trick. I'm just simply asking what your plan is with Taiwan and following up on something you suggested.
What I have said countless times is strategic partnership with India to close the Malacca Strait if necessary. That's where China gets its Middle Eastern oil supplies. The number one thing to do, I've said, is end the war in Ukraine by pulling apart the Russia-China alliance. Xi Jinping's calculus right now is that if the U.S. actually is in dual conflict with Russia and China, then that makes it easier for China to go after Taiwan. So I say disband that alliance. I also think that we should, and I've said this many times, we should take many one of the destroyers that are in Japan, run one a week through the Taiwan Strait until we've achieved semiconductor independence. Move to two Ohio-class SSGNs loaded with 100-plus Tomahawks apiece to the South China Sea and to the Indian Ocean. This is part of a comprehensive strategy that I've articulated in multiple places. But as part of that, I do think there's a reason why China does not have a Second Amendment. China is deathly afraid of a Second Amendment in its own country. And so making that an export to Taiwan is part of what many military experts call the porcupine strategy, which I do subscribe to and believe in. But I will not allow someone to put words in my mouth to say that I ever said that was sufficient. It is
I'm
not.
not putting words in your mouth. I'm simply asking about something you said. We played a quote that you've made. Speaking of another comment that you've made. I never said it was sufficient. Vivek, speaking of another comment that you've made that is getting attention today about 9/11, a report in the Atlantic that you gave an interview to, you said, quote, I think it is legitimate to say how many federal agents were on the planes that hit the Twin Towers. Maybe the answer is zero. It probably is zero for all I know, right? I have no reason to think it was anything other than zero. But if we're doing a comprehensive assessment of what happened on 9/11, we have a 9/11 commission. Absolutely, there should be an answer the public knows the answer to. Explain to me what you meant there.
This is really, it's funny. I mean, the Atlantic is playing the same game as CNN. It's funny. What I said is on January 6th, I do believe that there were many federal agents in the field and we deserve to know who they are. On 9/11, what I've said is that the government lied. And this is incontrovertible evidence, Caitlin. The government lied about Saudi Arabia's involvement. There was a Saudi spy named al-Bayoumi who they lied, and the government lied, and the 9/11 Commission lied. We know that because declassified reports in 2021 revealed that al-Bayoumi was indeed. What's that?
Yeah, the report that President Biden declassified. Yes. But your quote here, are you telling me that the quote is wrong
20 years later,
here?
Yeah.
But are you telling me that your quote is wrong here because it says how many federal agents were on the planes at the Twin Towers?
Yeah, when I actually, and this is just lifting the curtain on how media works again, I asked that reporter to send the recording because it was on the record. He refused to do it. But we had a free-flowing conversation. The truth is there are lies the government has told about 9/11, but it's not the ones that somebody put in my mouth. It's the one that I articulated, which is that Saudi Arabia, absolutely, their intelligence was involved in 9/11. And that's a difficult thing you're not supposed to say. The facts back that up. Separately, as it relates to January 6th, same story all over again. There were federal agents in the field. I think they've lied about how many there were. And we, the people, deserve the truth, despite the layers of distortion that exist in the media to prevent us from getting it.
You're saying that you were misquoted here. So we will take you at your word. Yes. You're saying that you were misquoted here. But you were asked another time recently about whether or not 9/11 was an inside job. This is what your response was.
9/11 inside job or exactly how the government tells us?
I don't believe the government has told us the truth. Again, I'm driven by evidence and data. What I've seen in the last several years is we have to be skeptical of what the government does tell us. I haven't seen evidence to the contrary, but do I believe everything the government told us about it? Absolutely not.
That's two questions.
The 9/11 Commission? Absolutely not.
I mean, Vic, I think people look at those comments. They look at what you said in the Atlantic, which you say you were misquoted. They look at comments that you've made about the Federal Reserve adding zeros to media companies' bank accounts. And I mean, it looks like you're floating conspiracy theories with this defense of I'm just asking questions.
Well, when you actually quote me, those are my words, and I stand by them. So somebody else quoting me, putting words in my mouth, I have a problem with. But those words I stand by. You want to know why? Because we literally know the FBI, the 9/11 Commission, the U.S. government on down, told us specifically that Saudi Arabia had no involvement. 20 plus years later, quietly declassifying documents showing that not only did Saudi Arabia have involvement, it was a Saudi intelligence agent that received two of those terrorists that crashed planes on 9/11, killing Americans.
But the question was, is 9/11 an inside job? And you didn't say no.
Caitlin,
That's what
you
I
just
think people are looking at.
Caitlin, you know what's really funny? You literally just played that, and you could play it for your audience again. He said, or do you believe everything the government has told us? And my answer was, I do not believe everything the government has told us.
But you see
because
the point.
They lied.
The point is
and
that
I know
it leaves
this game
the door
comes up,
open.
Caitlin, every time there's an outsider who comes in.
It leaves the door open, Vivek. It leaves the door open, and someone who's
Caitlin,
a 9/11 truther
we
looks
have a
at that and
government that
says,
systematically
that's exactly what I
lies.
believe. You think the government's lying about 9/11?
I think the government has systematically and for a very long time lied about 9/11. And I think I'm the only presidential candidate who has told us the truth. Saudi Arabia's involvement. It is absolutely true.
But you don't think that 9/11 was an inside job,
correct?
correct?
Of course not. And I've never said it. But the media filters do create a lot of
It's not
falsehoods,
a media filter. You have to stop blaming the media. I'm asking you about comments that you have made.
And I'm telling you that the comments I made, the ones you just played, are indeed what I believe, which was not that 9/11 was an inside job, but that Saudi Arabia absolutely was involved, and our government for 20 years lied to the American people about it.
There was an entire 9/11 Commission report on this.
Yes, and it lied, and it was false. And in fact, you know where that's coming out, Caitlin? There's now a federal case in the Southern District of New York, where the government of Saudi Arabia is being sued by victims of families. That's why this is resurfacing itself. It is relevant, and it turns out
But there's a difference in asking questions about Saudi Arabia's involvement and the government's involvement, and then pushing this idea that what your comment about who was on the plane and then was 9/11 an inside job where you did not say no earlier. That's why it's important to clarify those comments, because otherwise it feels like you're towing the line when it comes to conspiracy theories.
Caitlin, I am guilty as charged that I do not follow the establishment super PAC donor approved script on these questions, but I am speaking truth, grounded in fact, at every step of the way. And that's what's really elicited something of an anaphylactic reaction of the kind we saw in 2016 against a different candidate. But this time I'm going to be grounded in principles and conviction, not just vengeance and grievance, which is exactly how we will reunite this country.
That's just simply what we were asking for. But Vivek Ramaswamy will have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Caitlin.